Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMS Cast. I'm joined by a special guest. His name is Jason Yurasi. You can find him at jasonyurasi.com in the Live 100 podcast. But first, welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be here.
I'm excited to dig into it with you. You've got a lot of interesting threads in your story. One is about how you built a real estate investing empire, how you help other people do the same, and your own journey of perseverance and personal development. I think there's a lot we can learn here. But let's start with the real estate story. I consider myself a novice real estate investor. I've built one spec home. I've sold two lots. I have a rental, a second property that I rent out right now. I've run an Airbnb business off of my house, which was actually just a travel trailer that I fenced in my yard at one point.
Wow.
But I've always loved real estate and been fascinated by it. But just to give some context, can you tell us about where you're at as a real estate investor today?
Yeah, well, you say novice, but 99% of the world have no real estate investment. So you are ahead of most in the world who have gone out there and probably thought of it, but never taken action, right? And that's usually the biggest piece with real estate is it's such a big blue ocean. You can do so many different things with it, but sometimes when there's so much opportunity and so many different directions you can go, it paralyzes you, right? You get stuck because you just don't know where to start, right? So kudos for you just getting out of the gate. And myself, I faced some loss like during my high school years, right? So some friends passed away. A girlfriend was killed in a car accident. I went to college, and I was just kind of lost in what I wanted to do, right? Just didn't feel like I had much direction. I feel like things were kind of crumbling around me. My dad had a small family business that was constantly struggling. So I got into college, through sports, and just didn't really have much desire. So I ended up picking business as a major, got a finance degree, and left college, and just was not really motivated, right? I moved into New York City, just, doing odd jobs. Didn't want to do anything with my degree. I didn't want to do anything with, business or finance. And so I just started working in bars and restaurants. And it was, it was fun, but it wasn't fulfilling, if that would make sense. Like, you're just doing stuff. It's like energetic, but you're just like, what am I doing? And around you, you have, friends who are, getting jobs, right? They're getting that full-time jobs. Maybe they're, getting married. They're doing all these things that seem like they're progressing in life while you're here just, going, living by the moment, right? And with that breeded, a lot of chaotic results. And I just wasn't really happy with where I was. I just wasn't really satisfied for the day in and day out. And I just wasn't being productive, like, within my own life. And so, did that for a couple of years. And then one night, just angry at the world, I was riding home my bike at 2 or 3 in the morning, and out of nowhere got hit by a car. Threw me in the air, I got taken to the hospital, and, some broken bones and some stitches in my face. I got a pin in my wrist, and I get out of, the hospital, and I'm just getting back to my apartment, and my mind is so focused that I need to get back to work because I need to make rent. And I had this like moment of pause. I was like, okay, this is a crazy thought. I'm just hit by a car. I'm at a place I don't want to be. I don't like the job. I don't like where I am. And now all I'm thinking about is how after this I can just get back to exactly where I don't want to be. So I made like a pact for myself. It wasn't this like magical transformation overnight, but I was like, okay, if I'm going to keep doing this, then I have to be okay getting these results and not complain about it, or I need to start to change something. But the thing was, I just didn't know what to change. So slowly and surely, I just started to do little things, right? So get up early, right? Stop drinking after work, right? Stop, doing things that weren't really in a path that was going to be positive. Start working out, start reading, right? Just start putting myself into other areas where people were really being more positive. And little by little, things started to change. So I went from working behind the bar to owning a bar, owning a restaurant in New York City. I opened and sold a brewery in New York City before moving to New Jersey, because out of nowhere, Hurricane Sandy happened and decimated, a lot of the East Coast. And my dad's business, his small business, really was targeted at heavy construction jobs that did a lot with lifting homes. And so his business went overnight from like a couple jobs to like thousands of calls a day. And so my little brother was working for me. My now wife was working with me. We moved to New Jersey and helped dad really scale up the business. And that was fun, but it wasn't really, again, the direction I wanted to go. So we kept asking, like, what was it? At this time, my now wife, she was pregnant with our first child, and our day was so chaotic. It was so busy that if there was 25 hours in a day, I could have done it. So we came upon the word real estate, right? And that, like we said earlier, was just this big blue ocean. What we did is we just started to try different formats. So we went out there, we started, flipping houses, we built houses, we started wholesaling, we started doing Airbnbs, started doing all of these different forms of real estate. And it was going fine, but it was just, we weren't really, we were doing good, but we weren't doing great because it was just anywhere and everywhere. And one day came upon someone who was buying apartment communities, and they were actually buying larger apartment communities, putting together a team, putting together a process and allowing the process and the team to do the work. And that was that moment where I was like, I get it. This is how you can really scale a real estate business, is that you have to go all in one sector, in one part, a piece of the puzzle, put together the team, put together the process, put together the pattern, and then rinse and repeat. So we stopped all the other real estate we were doing. We went all into learning the large apartment investing business. And back in 2017, we bought a 94 unit while living in New Jersey and Louisville, Kentucky. And that was the first of the evolution of buying apartment communities. We've now since brought about 3,400, 3,500 units, pretty much down here in the Southeast, mainly large apartment buildings. And it's been about 320 to 340 million of real estate.
Wow, what a cool story. I have a ton of questions.
Sure.
Uh, so when you started learning from somebody that there was like a system and a process you could put in place to scale this multifamily or apartment strategy, what were you learning through? Was it through books? Was it through a mastermind, through online courses, coaching? What was it?
So first was a podcast, right? I came upon a podcast, and because, and what happened was, like, I heard that because you hear, you go on podcasts and you go on a real estate podcast, and one day to the next, it's tax liens, flipping, wholesaling, it's all over the place. So I heard that, I was like, whoa, okay, I understand that model. That model really makes sense. So what I did is I put the blinders on. Instead of going onto this generic real estate podcast, I went all in from learning podcasts, then learning from books, and then looking for networks, right? Looking for groups that were doing this, right? So I just found people that were doing it. I found two different people that were doing it in two different ways. One was buying it through syndication. That's a model we use a lot, where basically you'll pool funds from investors and yourself to be able to buy a large asset. And the other were buying it through their, basically friends and family, like one or two partners in themselves, and they were managing it themselves. So I took both processes, I learned from both, and then I put together my own process to back in. Because what I found is that lots of times we want to recreate the wheel, right? You want to redo the process and make it like your own. When in fact, if you just see other people that are doing it successfully, you say, well, what are they doing? And you follow that pattern, it allows you to get out of the gate to be successful and trying to re-engineer this whole process for yourself.
How did you get the kind of startup capital for the first 94 unit property?
Yeah, great question. So had a great suggestion by someone, is that it's always, we want to say, hey, once I get the deal, I'll get the money. But once you get the deal, the hardest thing is to get the money, because now you're under pressure, right? So instead of me being able to come to you, Chris, and be like, hey, listen, I'm learning about buying apartment buildings. I'm really excited about this. The reason I can do this is because they have cash flow, they have appreciation, depreciation, tax benefits, debt pay down, and you are able to put together a team to run all this. So I don't have to do the day to day. So we're going after large assets, and I give you all the understanding and reasoning for you to understand the investment, that you can go make a qualified decision. Right. But if I need your money today, then I have to say, hey, are you ready to invest right now? Because I have to close in 30 days. That's not a good feeling for you, and it puts a lot of pressure on me. So I had a very great suggestion, is that I created the type of property I wanted to go after. So I knew that in Louisville, I was going to find a 75 to 125 unit apartment building. It was going to be built between 1970 and 2000. That was really focused for the workforce housing. It was going to be in the south side of Louisville, because that's where a lot of the workforce housing was targeted. And the price was going to be anywhere between 3 and 7 million, depending on the product, right? Depending on the property. And then I did my analysis, and I made a very simple one page about what I was going to find. So now I've set the standard of what I'm looking for out there. So now when I was talking to brokers and talking to bankers, I was telling them specifically what I wanted to find, right? So that now helps me. It also starts setting a reticular activator in my mind in motion, because now I'm looking for it, right? Everything in front of me, that's what I'm targeting on. And then I started to talk to my network. And so, I started talking to basically my friends and my family, and saying, hey, listen, I'm looking for this kind of investment. I'm going to do this for a number of reasons. Some we just mentioned, the cash flow appreciation, right? And you can partake in this because you will be a partner in the deal. However, I'm going to do all the operations, all the management, all the lead generation. I'm going to sign the loan. I'm going to put together the whole process. But you're going to come in there as a passive investor. It's going to offer these kind of returns. That's the returns sector we've set up for it. Would you have interest if I can find this? And what that did is it didn't put any pressure on them. And then it gave them a very simple one page to go back there and explore. But I would find that I was able to get commitments between 25,000, 50,000, 75,000. So by the time I found the 94 unit, I had already mentally raised about $1.2, $1.3 million of yeses, right? It's not money I took in, but I had the confidence that I had been able to raise that amount of money through people who would have interest when I found it. So when I did find that deal, I just went back to the people. And within that, it was almost like, I think it was a day and a half, I'd had all the capital committed because I'd already done the pre-work. And the pressure was no longer on them because they had already gotten all their questions out. Some, the one pager was sufficient, right? They got it. Some wanted to see a lot more detail. And then we were able to get into the weeds, but it didn't put this over resounding pressure of, hey, I got this deal. I need you to give me an answer right now.
So how long after that deal went through did you realize like, hey, this is definitely going to work? Like this is all going to work out well for everybody involved?
Pretty quickly. You take 45 to 60 days just to get like your feet under you. But what was empowering there is that I, at the same time of finding investors, I was putting together teams, right? I was finding who was going to be my property manager, who's going to be my insurance broker, who was going to be all the team around me. So when I took on the deal, it wasn't me trying to find, like all the nuts and bolts of how the deal works. I had qualified team that just put this into the process of what they do each and every day. So I said, okay, here's my objectives with the deal. Here's what I want to do. Here's my renovation plan. Here's my marketing plan, right? Give me your feedback and your suggestions as we get into this. So when we closed, we were running out of the gate, but to see it in formality of like just saying, okay, the renovation would take place. Now we'd be able to get a unit leased within 2 or 3 weeks or 7 days at the new rental rates. That's when the proof of the pudding started to come in, because to say, okay, the business plan is actually hitting the stride right now. What we're anticipating is now actually being executed on the back end.
Wow. And what had to change in your mindset to pull that off? Like, going from guy who was in the accident on the bike to being a guy who could put a deal together for 94 units. Like, did you break through any mental barriers or mindset shifts? I'm sure you did. Just let us know what happened.
Almost everything. And, you find when you grow up, your belief system, for better or worse, is formulated by just your surrounding, right? The people, like your family, right? Your parents, like who you're around in school, just who you grew up with, what patterns you see within terms of people that pretty much are in your daily life, or even like what you watch on TV. And so, not for instance, I just, there was a ton of scarcity in my world, right? A ton of things of just that there's never enough, or if someone did something that if someone made a lot of money, they probably had to do something like bad to get it, right? There was all these just bad beliefs in my mind that we were always limited in our growth, right? And limited in our opportunity. And we wouldn't have these opportunities, even though others did, that wouldn't be our world, right? And so I was constantly in a state of blame for many years, right? Just saying that where I was at was everybody else's reason, right? My parents' reasons, my school's reasons, the loss I had, or, the government, you blame whoever. Like I would have pointed a finger at them, until one day I just said, really with the idea of what was happening is that no matter what, it's me, right? I am the one making these decisions here, right? And so I can, and the Stoics have the part of like, you can control what you think, right? And you control how you act to what's given to you, right? And many times we get lost in this format is that we lose control of how we're acting to what's coming to us, right? Sometimes it's not fair, but that's okay. It's just life. And how you show up in the moment really can set the stage of like how you can continue to progress. So the more I started to put the onus on, okay, I can only control my actions, right? I can only control what I'm doing each and every day. I can't control the goals, right? I can't, like the 94 unit, I couldn't control if and when that showed up. But I knew if I did the steps, and I said, okay, each day I'm going to get up and I'm going to call brokers. I'm going to underwrite deals. I'm going to make offers, right? I knew it was going to get me one step closer. When that goal was going to come, I don't know. And when I got out of the mold of just saying that the goal was the pinnacle moment, and it was just the actions became the pinnacle moment. right? It's like a lot with working out. Like if you run, like, you may have the action of like, you want to do a goal of a marathon, but that doesn't start with you just doing the marathon. That starts with you getting up, 3 to 5 times a week and start to run 3 miles, 5 miles, right? In different parts, different starts, different sprints, long runs, right? Doing your training, your actions that you can control. It's a lot with, our habits in life. We get so lost in the goal. Like right now, like we're coming to the end of the year, and most people, like, you're probably waiting for like the new year to start. I'll get my New Year's resolution out of the way, but 92% of New Year's resolutions fail. Well, why? It's because we set this big overarching goal that we have no foundation to start, right? And so like today, I'm going to lose 40 pounds. You haven't worked out in a year and a half, but like, you're just going to go lose 40 pounds. So the first weekend, you work out for 3.5 hours the first day, and you're like, oh, I'm so sore. And maybe like, you're like, oh, I won't go back. You don't go back for 9 days. And then you work out for a half hour and you just get busy again. And then it all goes off because we haven't built the foundation to start giving us the support to be able to progress forward into the actions of what will bring us to where we want to be.
So how old were you when you got the first 94 unit deal?
36. All right. 37. Yeah.
And then how long has the journey been to today? How many units is it today?
So to be honest, we just closed 355. So we're probably about 3,500 units, right
So,
around there, give or
so who
take.
did you need to become to scale from 94 unit guy to 3,500 unit guy? Or were you, or did you, is the stuff we already talked about, it just was the natural thing that carried you through?
No, absolutely a great question, right? Because with the 94 unit, and then I did a 48 unit and a 58 unit, right? And it was myself and my wife running all these projects, and then we were capped, right? Because in that part, when you are in the way of your success, right, the success gets limited because you're trying to do all the steps, right? So if there's 10 things to do, and I'm like, I'm going to do them all perfect, right? But I can only get 2 done in a day. Then I'm like, 2 are at 100, right? And the other 8 are at 0. But in the same part, you're like, no, I'm a perfection. I'm going to get it all done perfect, but you didn't do 8 of them, right? And so you will limit your growth. And when I found that I was the linchpin, right? So if I was underwriting deals, I couldn't be out there working on asset management. If I was doing asset management, I couldn't go out there to be talking to investors. If I was talking to investors, I couldn't be talking to brokers, right? So you just can't do it all. So we had to really look at our business and say the growth of our business is around putting teams in place. It was the same thing I had done, restaurants and bars. We're just saying, okay, I'm not out there, serving the food, cooking the food, running out the drinks. I'm not doing all those parts of the process. I had a team in place. That's the same thing I need here. So we started to hire strategic people upon our team that started to carry some of the load on the back end that allowed us to focus on the core parts of the business, right? The core parts for my business is really lead generations, like looking at new opportunities, and then capital, right? Capital raising, capital preservation. So I have to make sure that I have my eyes on those two sides, while on the same side, I have people focused on marketing, focused on leasing, focused on asset management, focused on construction that are in the back end. And what that did is it allowed us to put more focus on the evolution of the business while putting a supporting team underneath.
That's awesome. Part of life is like what I call finding the others or finding a tribe. We're all parts of different tribes. Like I'm in a techie software tribe. I'm in like a
Nice.
course creator coach tribe. And I also am a runner. I've got like my running people and stuff like that. But tell us about the real estate investor tribe, the type of those folks that you kind of run with, that you're a member of that tribe or community. What kind of patterns have you noticed with people who get into real estate investing and really get into it kind of in the style that you do? Like, what are these people like? What commonalities do you see in real estate investors?
I like the figure it out mode. I think that's a very important one. So like many times in life, like when you're used to just a certain pattern in your life, like 9 to 5, like, and that's something that's great for you, fantastic. But many times in a 9 to 5, you have a certain pattern. And when something comes out there that it's unexpected, you get stopped, right? It's just it's a basic stop in your day, stop in your life, because you haven't faced the adversity or the hurdle, right? Where in fact, for our business, each day there's hurdles, right? There's unexpected things. We prepare in our best way to have everything prepared, right? And do everything in part, but there's always wild cards. You have a building that has 100, 200, 300 people living in there. There's always going to be unexpected things that come up, right? So we constantly have to be in the mode of just looking for the opportunity, but then understand the opportunity is going to come with setbacks. And the more that you can look at those setbacks as ways for you to problem solve, the more successful you will be. And that's like most life, is that, we can look at problems as problems, or you look at problems as opportunities. And the more you can look at problems as opportunities, the more the bigger and larger scale or ability you'll have to go out there and be successful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think real estate has a lot of like, okay, well, I've never been in this situation before. How do
Correct.
I figure that out? And that takes a certain type of person.
Yeah.
You mentioned lead gen is a big thing that you do. How do you like what have you learned about lead generation that may be somewhat counterintuitive that could apply to other industries as well? Like, how do you think about lead gen?
So I look at it as you have your core leads, right? And then you have your everything else leads. And so we'll put this in buckets, is that, in our business, we have brokers, right? A real estate agent, they're typically going to put it on the MLS, put it on the open market right there. And so like, it's going to be for everybody to see. Many times in the commercial world, brokers, they may not actually list the deal or put the deal out there to open network. It may just be a pocket listing. So we've created a very good network, being specified with certain brokers that know exactly what we're looking for, and know we can operate, and know we can close the deal, and know we're going to say, we're going to do what we're going to say, or we're going to say what we're going to do, right? And all the same, right? And what that's allowed us to has been allowed us to be first to opportunity, especially here in this area. So about 75%, maybe 70% of our deals come through brokers. The other 30% come through our network. Like, we've brought it everything from just walking next door to a neighboring building, to through mailing letters, right? Through just unsolicited emails, through just through property managers, right? That we're working on deals. We found it through all the other parts. And what is allowed for a marketing stance that has helped us is being very specific with what we want, because that allows us to know when we find it, right? That's most important. But it also, the biggest key, it allows us to kick out all the stuff that's a waste of time. Right. So if I was just open to anything, then some days I'd be, looking at a 300 unit brand new construction. Other days would be a 12 unit condo building. Some days it would be a 50 unit that was built in 1900. Right. And each of these underwrite to a different world, and each of these operate differently. So then my mind would have to be open to understanding, to explore all these different ways. But in the back end, there's someone who's really honed in with their marketing, knows exactly what they want. And by the time I figure out which of those deals potentially had, some potential to them, someone had beat me to the deal because they were actually looking for it. And so when I've gotten to the point with my marketing, I've gotten very focused on what I'm looking for, right? It's allowed me to be the first person into the deal, because I know what works and I know what doesn't.
I love that. In the course creator industry, it's, we call it the customer avatar, or your
Sure. Yeah.
ideal
Yeah. Very similar. Yeah.
customer profile. But I heard it in your story earlier. You're like, I'm looking for a property built between this year and this year, 80 to 100 units, this side of town, this. So you had your target was crystal.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's important, because you get lost, because, like, when we bring people in our world and they want to learn about this, like, they think like more opportunity is better. And yes, more opportunity is great. But if you're like, hey, I have 1,000 leads across the US, well, you don't know what side of the town you're on in certain places. You don't know if you're in the path of progress. You don't know if you're in the good school areas. You don't know if there's, a good lead or good job drivers in that area. You don't know, what side the state is, a red state, a blue state, right? Is it landlord friendly, tenant friendly? You're lost, and you just don't have the time or the ability to go in there. So sure, you can underwrite 1,000 leads, but why don't you just underwrite 10 of them that are in your target, where in fact you'll be much closer to the goal of finding one.
All right, another question for you. What kind of habits and routines do you have so that literally you don't explode? Because what I mean by that is there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Uh, you said you're married, I believe, and you've got like home life, and real estate is like kind of infinite and always changing. But like you said, you're really target focused and stuff like that. But what do you do like on a regular, either daily or weekly cadence that helps keep the wheels on the bus?
Yeah. I control the morning, because, as you know, during the day, right? Like, things come up that are just outside of anything, right? And then you have to be able to react. But I've set really the importance on the morning. So I get up early, right? I'll get up early, I'll have a glass of water, I'll meditate, I'll work out, I'll go in there and just have a moment for myself before I have 3 kids, 10, 8, 6, right? Before they get up, right? Because when they're up too, I also want to be, present with them before they go to school, right? So I'll do that because it gives me a time for my mind to just come to that moment of calm, right? But then also put myself through some energy format between working out. And so now I'm set. And by the time I get to work, right, if something comes up, I come into the office, right, and something explodes. Now I have my controlled focus that I can go look at it for what it is and solve, right? Where many times, and I was guilty of this myself, is that most you get up late, you hit the snooze button, you wake up, you're rushed, right? You eat something bad, you jump into the car, you're stuck in traffic, you're angry because now you're in traffic, you get to work and then there's fire after fire and you're just in constant chaos mode. You get stuck in traffic on the way home. You get home and you sit down and you have a beer and you watch Netflix. You're like, never again. And then the next day happens and the next day and the next day and just repeats because you didn't take control, right? And I can't promise that the day is not going to have, some wildfires, right? That's just the coolness of the day, right? But if you can control the start, at least you can be focused on what it is when it comes up to understand, is this urgent, an emergency, or just something I can wait, right? Where we get out of the mode of chaos, then it really gives us back like our freedom.
I love that. I'm a huge morning routine guy.
Love it.
I took one of the first online courses I took in 2007 or something was called Wake Up Productive.
Oh, nice.
And it literally changed my life. And I've been working on my morning routine for over a decade. And I feel like unhinged without it. Like if I'm
You do,
traveling
right?
and I
Yeah.
miss it, I'm like, oh God. Speaking of like just a lot going on, why start a YouTube channel and a podcast as well?
A lot of the conversation I come up with is that, okay, you're here, right? But I'm here, right? And I was like, okay, I was there too, right? So like, and usually you're like a step forward or a step behind most. It's not that much further. And so I just went back and started looking at what I was doing, and I put together, I had to break the habits that weren't serving me so I could build a process to magnify the results, right? And those were really the 3 foundational blocks I started looking at. And within there, I just had to be, I had to be self-aware how I was showing up, right? And then I had to own it. And then I started having to position myself to where I wanted to be. And so I just started looking at this process and I put this together. And this is what, I talk about through Live 100 is that, we all have our starting line, which is right here where we are today. Your starting line is not tomorrow. It's not last week, right? You can't live in the past. You can't live in the future. You're right here, right now. And so what you have is what you have available. And we have a lot more at our disposal than we think we do, right? Most of the time we think we're lacking. Like when I read one more book or when I meet that person or when I have, 50,000 in the bank, then I will start. But you can start right now. You just have to start mentally to understand that you have to be self-aware how you're showing up in the moment, right? I was showing up in ways that we're not self-serving, right? We're not helping me, we're not helping others around us, right? Then I had to own it. I had to say, okay, like that's how I'm showing up. So stop it, like just quit it. But at the same time, I had to look at, okay, I want to be that person, right? I want to start having that success level. Well, how is that person showing up? Because most of the time we see how we're showing up and we think we can just do the same things to become the person we want to be. You have it within you, but you have to start having different things in your mind, right? So, even your talk, right? If most of the time it's like, I can't, I won't, I don't know how, it's going to be harder to do it than if you can just say, okay, I'm going to figure it out, right? Or I can, or I will, right? If you just start changing and understanding how your wording is in the day, it's going to make a massive transformation. And so we started putting this together because these messages aren't new, but there's something of one that one needs to hear and understand that each of us can do great things if we choose to, but it takes us, right? It takes us to show up. It doesn't take someone else to come there and give us the confidence to do it.
That's awesome. And what is the Live 100 brand name? What's the story behind that?
Yeah. So, funny enough, I had this bulldog, right? That was always, so the bulldog, yeah, I had a bulldog that they're usually supposed to live like 8 or 9 years old, right? And this bulldog, Jack, he was like with me everywhere. He lived to like 15, right? This great dog. And he became the evolution of named my brewery after him. I had a slider and sushi restaurant in New York City. I named Jack. It was Jackson Y. Like, so he was the evolution of everything behind me. And he always he was all in, right? So we always at 100. And so one day I was talking to someone, they're like, the word for 100 in Greek was Akato. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But it'd be hard for everybody to understand Akato. And I just looked back at Jack's life is that like when there was food or something Jack wanted, there was no like 0, right? There was no like 40%, like it was 100. And most of the time, like we're given like 50 or we're given like 60, like we may be 100, like in our morning routine, but then, like in my faith or in my family, I'm like at 40 or 70. And so the Live 100 message was that we have to look at our life in a holistic approach, is that across everything, right? How can we learn to level up and live our 100 each and every day?
That's awesome. Let's talk about masterminds. You've done them, you've run them. I'm a big masterminder. I'm involved in 4 right now. It's
That's
something
sweet.
I've done for a long time. And Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, that's where the concept of the mastermind like was really first introduced, I think. But so I've just consciously made masterminds a part of my life, and I've had huge benefit. But tell us about how you think about masterminds and what you've done.
You get surrounded by people that, many times in our world, like we're kind of out there on an island, right? So most of the people that you're in, like, so if I go to my kid's school, like most of the people are not doing what I'm doing, right? They're doing their own thing, for better or worse, right? They're in their own life. So you're not exposed to a lot of people that have potentially have, we'll say, similar outlooks or similar goals or similar things. And when you go, when you're surrounded with other people, one, you see from them, you say, okay, they've tried this and this hasn't worked, so don't do that, right? So now you get that learning lesson of what not to do, but then you get the learning lesson of what they are doing, right? And it helps fast track your journey. And that's where we miss a lot of parts with masterminds. It's like, oh, it could be expensive part, but you're surrounded with people that are leveling up at such a capacity that now you can skip the line, right? You can get ahead of all these parts because they've done all the learning steps, right? They're doing all the parts of the process that you want to do. And you say, okay, how do I do that? Just like I started looking at other people doing real estate in the back and saying, okay, what was the model? Well, when you're surrounded with other people, both mentally, physically, emotionally, they're all in the same direction as you.
How do you think about discipline? Because it's one thing to like make changes; it's another to keep it going over time and stay focused.
So you can look at discipline in 2 ways, right? There's the discipline that you have to allow things to grow and allow things to nurture, right? There's the Chinese bamboo tree that you have to water for almost 5 years before it will grow, and then within 3 months it grows 100 feet high, right? Well, most of us, we change day in, day out because every day there's something new, so we never can see if there's actually the ability for something to work. But then we have to be disciplined if we are doing something to track the results, because we may be disciplined and doing something and say, well, I'm just doing it, but you're not paying attention if there's actually positive results in the back end. So now you're in 3 or 4 or 5 years. You're like, well, I've done it so long, so I have to keep going. When in fact, the discipline is actually looking and being honest with yourself. So you'll start with the discipline that you have to allow it to run its course to see if it has some ability to move, and the discipline to honestly pivot, and then the discipline to be honest with yourself if it is not working, to make a change.
Speaking of the bamboo and the concept of time delay, when we work on ourselves or in our companies, sometimes it takes a while for the fruits of the effort to emerge or to realize something's working. How long did that take you to really realize, let's say from your first 94 unit property or whatever, to like just feel that this is going to work, I'm going to be okay?
I think our minds are always set up like in fear, right? Like we always think we're going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Like every single week, they're going to be killed. But as you work in yourself, when you work in your mind, you work in your process, that dissipates slowly but surely, right? And so over time, as you're doing things and things come up, you face new evolutions of challenges, right? But they're higher evolutions, right? So you look back at it as that, like, doing that 94 unit, that was like me climbing Mount Everest. And now it's like a speed bump, right? And so the evolution is now where my mind is. It was the same thing. So I brought a 94 unit today. It's the same process as back then, but now my mind has been challenged in different ways, so I'm more prepared for it, right? And so when we're going through the world of doing things, I try to call them like 5-year memories, right? Of what I'm facing today. Like, am I going to remember this 5 years from now? And if the answer is no, then okay, let's just get through and get it done because it's not that important. And most of the time we face everything as if it's going to be the end of us, right? Like the end of us. And it's something we're going to remember forever. And it paralyzes us. So we either don't act to it or we try to push it off, when in fact, you just have to get it done. And so the growth has been that there's always more room to grow. And the challenges you're facing today is because you're ready to face those challenges compared to the challenges that you faced years before.
What are the concepts of like social learning or masterminding uh, is this concept. I heard it described as plus minus equals. So like mastermind, you're kind of hanging out with people who are more or less in a similar business size or life situation or whatever, or industry. Um, Plus is where you're like looking up for mentorship and coaching, and minus is helping those on the path behind you.
Love
And
it.
by actually spreading the load across not just, let's say, going for high end coaching to help me individually, but also hanging with your peers and helping other people, it creates a much more kind of holistic um, learning opportunity. And you help the most people achieve their potential. Like, how do you think about that in terms of particularly those behind you, helping them achieve their potential?
The great thing is being able to see the result for people, right? Is that because I've been stuck before, and I know the feeling of being stuck and feeling stuck, right? And many times, people will come into your world and they feel stuck, but the stuck is because they're not making progress, right? And so you can help them unlock that one thing that changes everything for them, right? I'll give you an example. So I run too, right? And had a friend, and he wanted to run his first marathon, and I'm like, okay. And I went out. He was like, "Hey, will you come run with me?" I'm like, "Sure." So we go run, and we're running. He was like, it's like it was 3 miles. Every 3 miles was a stop sign. So he would get to the side. He's like, "I just can't get by the stop sign." I'm like, "Okay, why not?" He's just like, I'm just dead by the time I get there." So that day we ran to the stop sign, and it said instead of stopping the stop sign, they just run 20 more feet, right? And we ran 20 more feet. That was it. Well, that was all it took, right? That little thing, because now the stop sign was not the block, right? It was just that his mind had told him that the stop sign was the stopping point, right? So the next day he ran another 500 feet. The next day he ran another mile, right? And lo and behold, a couple months later, he ran a marathon. And it was because his mind was no longer in the way. And most of the time, our mind gets in the way from what we can actually execute because it wants to protect us, right? And so when you can look at those parts, like in real estate, in business development, in leadership, what's your stop sign? And what's the next step past it? All you have to do is take that one more step, and then now your mind opens up to new opportunities of what's available.
Jason, this has been an awesome conversation. If people are inspired and wanting to connect with you more or get involved, what are the best ways for them to learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, it's been great conversation. So you can go over to Live 100 podcast. It's on all the podcast platforms, Live 100, Jason Yurasi. You also go to jasonyurasi.com. There's a free assessment there if you want to take the Live 100 assessment. It just gives you to really more knowledge about where your starting line is today.
That's awesome. Well, Jason, thank you for being a shining light of entrepreneurial effort and helping others along the way. It's really inspiring, particularly in how you've done it across industries from restaurants, real estate, coaching, content, all these things. It's awesome. Keep up the amazing work, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.